Good morning, boys. Mr. Pope here. Right, hopefully you've taken a look at the answers that I've posted for the tasks that I asked you to do yesterday. And please adjust your answers if you need to, add in anything that you may have missed. Okay, so we're moving on today to look at some other causes of market failure, and you'll be needing to take notes down from slides 10 through to 16. The first of them is the failure of the free market to provide public goods, things like you see in the pictures here, parks, sewers, national defence and so on. With products like that, it's very difficult for private businesses to make a profit, therefore the market fails to provide them. The government therefore has to step in to do that. Another cause of market failure is when we have only one or maybe one or two very large firms who provide goods in a market. So there's very little competition. If we have a monopoly, then the risk is that they charge high prices because there's no competition, there's no incentive for them to keep their prices down. Now that may mean that people basically pay too much for their product, or they simply might not be able to afford to buy it at all, which constitutes another kind of market failure. Another form of market failure is what we call factor immobility. Now, obviously, immobile means unable to move. So that could mean like the physical ability to move from one location to another. So, for example, that could be if we need workers to pick apples in the Hawke's Bay, but the workers are all up in Auckland and they can't easily leave their families and homes to go to Hawke's Bay to pick those apples, then the immobility of that labour factor in this case means that not enough apples can be produced. It could also mean the inability of, for example, a capital factor, machinery we're talking about there, to move not a physical location but from one use to another. So it's not easy, for example, to take a piece of machinery that makes cars, say, and to adapt that piece of machinery so that it can make motorcycles or some other product. In that case, when the market changes, it's not going to be easy for firms to change what they produce in response to demand. So that may mean that at the end of the day, not enough of the goods that consumers want are going to be produced. The market fails. Okay, now the next thing we need to have a think about is this idea of private and external costs. The notes for this are here on slide 14 onwards. When you produce something, the producer pays private costs, which are basically his costs of production. So if you're making, let's say, beer, well, you pay for the ingredients that go into that beer, you pay the workers who work in your factory, you pay the advertising costs and so on. Those are all the manufacturer's private costs. For the consumer, they pay the $31.99 in this case. That's their private costs to consume. But then we have the external costs. Those are the costs caused to society by the production or consumption of this product. And we've talked about that before. Things like health problems, drunk driving, violence in the community, that kind of thing. Now, when we add those two costs together, we get what we call our social costs. So that's, just to repeat, the private costs are the costs that the producer pays to make the thing, and the cost that the consumer pays to buy the thing, and we add to that the extra costs that are borne by society generally. The two together we call our social costs. When somebody buys a car, for example, they just pay the cost, whether it might be $40,000, say, to buy that car. But over its lifetime, that car will cause congestion, it will cause pollution, and so on. The consumer of the car doesn't pay for those external costs that he or she causes. They only pay the private costs to buy the car. They don't pay the costs to society and to environment. So basically what's happening is the market is producing too many cars because it's not taking into account the damage that they cause. It works on the benefit side as well. The total benefit to society is not just the benefit that the individual producer or consumer gets, but also the benefit that is external to the production or consumption of the goods. So in the case of education, which we've talked about previously, you guys, the students, get the benefit of being more educated. You're more likely to get a job, earn higher money. But then we have those benefits to society of you being more productive, less likely to need government support, and so on. So the social benefit is much greater than the private benefit that you receive. Okay, thanks, boys.